No Canada, Chapter 4, Part 2, pages 25 to 29. No Canada, page 25, Part 2, Struggle for a Continent. Like the French, the English had also claimed large parts of North America. In the early 1600s, they had built colonies on the east coast of what is now the United States. They called this New Land, New England. Now the English decided that they also wanted part of the rich fur trade in the north. In 1670, King Charles II of England gave the Hudson's Bay Company the rights to trade in the region that had rivers or lakes that emptied into Hudson Bay. This was a huge piece of land. The French voyageur and the coureur de bois, working with the Aboriginal people, were also trading in this area. They traveled by canoe, using the rivers and the lakes to trade and transport furs. For 100 years, there was fierce competition between the French and the English over the fur trade. After the French lost Canada to the English in 1759, the Hudson's Bay Company continued to control the North for another 100 years. More and more people were immigrating to New England. Very few people were moving to New France. In the first 100 years, 15,000 French came to Canada, but only 3,400 of them stayed. The English colonies were growing larger and becoming richer. The French colonies remained small. France and England began to fight over who would control the continent. In 1759, the British, led by James Wolfe, and the French, led by the Marquis de Montcalm, fought a last battle on the Plains of Abraham at Quebec City. The British won. They renamed the colony the Province of Quebec. After England and France made peace in Europe in 1763, Canada became part of the British Empire. There were problems. The English were Protestant and the French were Catholic. In England and in the English colonies, Catholics didn't have the same rights as Protestants. The French had been living in Canada for 100 years. The habitants, or Canadiens, wanted to keep their way of life. They did not want to change their language, their laws, or their religion. In order to keep peace, the new governor of Quebec, Sir Guy Carleton, defended the rights of the French to the British Parliament. The British Parliament made a decision. The Quebec Act of 1774 said that the French Catholics could have religious freedom and the same political rights as the English Protestants. They had to use British criminal law, but they kept French civil law. The French-speaking colony also got to control over the Ohio Valley, a large piece of land west of the English colonies. The English were not allowed to settle there. The United Empire Loyalists. Peace did not last long. The colonists in New England were already angry that they did not have the same rights as the people in Great Britain. They did not like the fact that the French, who had been defeated, were allowed to have so many rights and freedoms. Also, in this image, you can see how large the province of Quebec was in 1774. It's the blue middle section, and it took in parts of what are now Canada and the United States. This is the area where the English were not allowed to settle. You can see from the red part that there were English settlements north of Quebec and also south into what is now the United States. Also, they didn't like the fact that the province of Quebec controlled the Ohio Valley, and they weren't allowed to settle there. In 1776, the New England colonies declared independence and formed the United States of America. Over the next 7 years, more than 40,000 United Empire Loyalists, people who wanted to stay part of the British Empire, moved to Canada. With the help of Sir Guy Carleton, they settled in Quebec and Nova Scotia. Many also settled on land west of Montreal, in what is now Ontario. Nova Scotia was divided, and a new colony of Loyalists were started in New Brunswick. Chief Joseph Brant brought thousands of loyal Mohawk Indians to Canada, about 3,000 black Loyalists. Freedmen and slaves also moved north. The beginning of democracy and the abolition of slavery. New France had been a crown colony. That meant that the King of France made all the decisions. He sent the governors and other political officials to rule New France. The colonists had no say in the government. The Loyalists from New England had been able to participate in their government, and they wanted to have this right in Canada as well. As part of the British Empire, the colonies began to move towards democracy. They wanted more say in how they were governed. They wanted representative government. A representative government is one where the people elect someone to represent them in a legislature. Each colony in British North America had separate governments and governors. Nova Scotia, a British colony since 1710, elected the first representative assembly in 1758. Prince Edward Island elected one in 1773, and New Brunswick did so in 1785. The settlers in these colonies could elect representatives to go to the assemblies, but the representatives did not have much power. They could give advice, but they did not have the power to make laws. The governor appointed by the British government did that. The province of Quebec also wanted an elected assembly. The Constitutional Act of 1791 divided the province of Quebec into two parts. The western part, settled by mostly Protestant, English-speaking Loyalists, became Upper Canada, now Ontario. The mostly French-speaking Catholic part became Lower Canada, Quebec. The act also gave the people the right to elect legislative or lawmaking assemblies. The name Canada became the official name of the two provinces. Altogether, Upper and Lower Canada and the Atlantic colonies were called British North America. John Graves Simcoe was the first lieutenant governor of Upper Canada. He founded the city of York, which is now Toronto, and made it the capital of Upper Canada. He was important in the fight against slavery. Mary Ann Shadd Carey was also important in this. From the previous page, we read that Mary Ann Carey was also important in this fight. She published a weekly newspaper about the evils of slavery. In 1793, the province of Upper Canada became the first province in the British Empire to abolish slavery. In 1833, slavery was totally abolished throughout the British Empire. However, slavery was still legal in the United States. Many Americans who were against slavery helped thousands of escaped slaves to get freedom in Canada. They followed an anti-slavery network called the Underground Railway. The rest of this page contains questions that you can study to prepare for the next class.